A 9-year-old boy stood in front of a trash can at Sterling Plaza, fishing out a half-eaten sandwich with hands that used to help his grandmother roll pie crust on Sunday mornings. Tucked inside his jacket, a shivering dog pressed against his ribs, the only family he had left. He didn't know that 20 feet behind him, a woman in designer heels was about to call him an animal. And he didn't know that 200 feet beyond her, 20 motorcycles were about to turn into the parking lot. What happened in the next 6 minutes would be talked about for years. But what happened in the next 6 weeks would change his life forever. Before we continue, subscribe to Bikers Bite and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. This one's going to stay with you. Sterling Plaza didn't belong to people like Leo. It belonged to women with shopping bags that cost more than rent. It belonged to men who checked their watches like time was something they owned. It belonged to coffee cups with names spelled wrong on purpose because the baristas were too tired to care about people who wouldn't tip anyway. Sterling Plaza was all polished concrete and designer window displays and the kind of quiet that only money can buy. Leo knew he didn't belong here. But hunger doesn't care where you belong. The boy moved like smoke through the afternoon crowd, thin, careful, invisible in the way that only survival teaches you to be. His hoodie was 2 sizes too big, the sleeves swallowing his hands, the hood pulled low even in the heat. His sneakers were held together with duct tape and prayer. 3 months ago, those sneakers had been new. 3 months ago, a lot of things had been different. He stopped in front of a decorative trash receptacle, the fancy kind, with a bronze rim and a little roof to keep the rain out. Sterling Plaza even had rich people trash cans. Leo glanced left. Right. Nobody watching, nobody ever watched. He reached in, his fingers found it immediately. A sandwich wrapped in wax paper, barely touched. Sourdough bread. Some kind of meat. Lettuce that was still crisp. Someone had taken 2 bites and thrown it away. 2 bites of something that could keep Leo alive for another day. He pulled it out carefully, checking for mold, for rot, for anything that would make him sick. He'd learned that lesson the hard way 2 months ago, spent 3 days behind a dumpster, so weak he couldn't move, praying the cramps would stop, promising God and his grandmother and anyone else who might be listening that he'd be more careful next time. This sandwich was fine. Better than fine. This sandwich was a gift. The smell hit him first. Sourdough. His hands stopped moving. His chest tightened. The plaza sounds faded into something distant and muffled. Like he was underwater, like he was somewhere else entirely. His grandmother made bread every Saturday. He could see her kitchen. Small. Clean. Always warm. The oven that made a clicking sound before it heated up. The window above the sink where she kept her little herb pots. Basil. Mint. Rosemary. The yellow curtains she'd made herself from fabric she bought at the discount store on Maple Street. She'd wake up early on Saturdays. Before Leo was even awake, she'd be in that kitchen, measuring flour, kneading dough, humming hymns under her breath. The smell would drift into his room and pull him out of sleep like a gentle hand. "You're up early, baby," she'd say when he wandered in, rubbing his eyes. Couldn't sleep. Smelled too good. She'd smile. That smile that made everything okay. That smile that said he was loved, he was safe, he was home. "Well, since you're up, you might as well help. Wash those hands, growing boys need to learn how to feed themselves." And he'd stand beside her at the counter, his small hands pressing into the dough while her bigger hands guided him. She'd show him how to fold it, how to knead it, how to feel when it was ready. Her hands were always warm. Always steady. Always there. "You're getting good at this, Leo. Keep practicing and maybe one day you'll make bread for your own family." His own family. Leo blinked. The memory dissolved. The plaza came rushing back, the sounds. The smells. The cold reality of where he was and what he was doing. He was standing in front of a trash can at a shopping center for rich people, holding a stranger's garbage, trying not to cry. He wasn't making bread for his family. He didn't have a family anymore. A small movement against his ribs brought Leo back. Rusty. The dog shifted inside Leo's jacket, pressing closer, seeking warmth despite the heat. Rusty always pressed closer. It was the dog's way of saying, "I'm here and I'm scared and please don't leave me all at once." Leo opened his jacket slightly, just enough for Rusty to poke his head out. The dog was small, a terrier mix, scruffy and tan with one ear that flopped and one that stood straight up. His eyes were too big for his face, brown and wet and full of something that looked like worry. Rusty always looked worried. Leo understood why. The world had given Rusty plenty of reasons to worry. "You hungry, boy?" Rusty's tail wagged weakly. His nose twitched toward the sandwich. "Yeah. Me too." Leo tore off a piece of the bread. The good part. With the meat still attached, he held it up to Rusty's mouth and watched the dog eat. Careful and grateful. Like he knew this might be the last meal for a while. It might be. Leo's stomach cramped with hunger, but he didn't eat yet. Rusty first. Always Rusty first. He'd found the dog 6 weeks after his grandmother died. 6 weeks of sleeping in alleys and doorways, and once, for 3 terrifying nights, in an abandoned car that smelled like mold and something worse. 6 weeks of learning which dumpsters had food and which store owners would chase you and which corners belonged to people who didn't like sharing. 6 weeks of being completely, utterly alone, and then he'd heard the whimpering. It was coming from behind a dumpster in the alley off Morrison Street. Small sounds. Weak sounds. The kind of sounds that something makes when it's given up but hasn't quite died yet. Leo had followed the sound. Rusty was wedged between the dumpster and the wall, so thin Leo could count every rib, so weak he couldn't even stand. His fur was matted with something dark, blood or dirt or both. His eyes were closed. He wasn't moving except for the tiny rise and fall of his chest. Something in Leo broke open. He'd lost so much. His grandmother. His home. His bed. His clothes. His books. His life. He'd lost the feeling of being safe, the knowledge that someone was coming home, the simple certainty that tomorrow would happen and it would be okay. He couldn't lose this too. He couldn't let this small, broken thing die alone in an alley. Leo had picked up the dog. Carried him for blocks. Looking for water. Looking for food. Looking for someone who could help. He'd stolen a bottle of water from a convenience store, the only thing he'd ever stolen, and dripped it into the dog's mouth, drop by drop, willing him to swallow, willing him to live. And Rusty had lived. Against all odds. Against all reason, that little dog had opened his eyes and looked at Leo, and something had passed between them. Something that didn't need words. Something that said, "You saved me, now I'm yours." Or maybe, "I found you. Now we're each other's." Leo's grandmother had always said you could tell a person's heart by how they treated things that couldn't help them back. Watch how someone treats a stray dog or an old person or a child who isn't theirs. That'll tell you everything you need to know about who they really are. Leo had watched a lot of people over the past 3 months. Most of them walked past him like he wasn't there. Some looked at him with disgust. A few looked with pity, which was almost worse. But Rusty never looked at him like that. Rusty looked at him like he was everything. Like he was enough. Like he mattered. That was worth going hungry for. "Okay, boy. Your turn's done, my turn now." Leo raised what was left of the sandwich to his mouth. His hands were shaking. His stomach was so empty it hurt. He was about to take a bite when, "What do you think you're doing?" The voice cut through the plaza like a blade. Leo froze. She emerged from the jewelry store like she was walking onto a stage. Everything about her screamed money. The kind of money that doesn't just buy things, but buys the right to look at other people like they're less. Her dress was silk, cream-colored, probably cost more than Leo's grandmother made in a month when she was still alive. Her shoes were heels tall, red, the soles that particular shade that meant designer. Her bag was leather. Her sunglasses were oversized. Her jewelry caught the light and threw it back like a challenge. She was holding a dog. A tiny thing, all white fluff and trembling, with a pink bow on its head and a collar that sparkled with what might have been actual diamonds. The dog looked terrified. Leo understood that too. Some people's love felt more like prison. Behind her, a store employee held the door open, nodding and smiling the way you do when someone spent enough money to matter. Patricia Wellington stepped into the plaza, surveying her kingdom. And then her eyes landed on Leo. Her face changed. It was subtle at first. A flicker of recognition, not of Leo specifically, but of what he represented. Poverty, dirt, disorder, a stain on the smooth surface of her afternoon. Then the flicker became a flame. She walked toward him, her heels clicking on the polished concrete, each step deliberate, each step an accusation. The other shoppers parted for her without even thinking about it. They always did. People like Patricia Wellington had a gravity that pulled lesser beings out of their way. Leo wanted to run. Every instinct he'd developed over 3 months of survival was screaming at him to disappear, to slip away, to become invisible again. But his feet wouldn't move. His hands were still clutching the sandwich. Rusty was still pressed against his ribs, whimpering softly at the approaching danger. She stopped 3 feet away. Up close, she was beautiful in the way that ice is beautiful. Perfect and cold and capable of cutting you if you got too close. Her eyes moved over Leo like he was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. The dirty hoodie. The taped sneakers. The sandwich in his garbage-stained hands. The small lump of dog trembling beneath his jacket. When she spoke, her voice was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Look at you." Leo's throat closed up. He couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Could only stand there while she circled him like prey. Digging through garbage like an animal. The words landed like blows. Each one precise. Each one designed to wound. "You belong with dogs. She paused, looking at the lump under his jacket, her lip curling in disgust. Actually, that's an insult to dogs. At least dogs have pedigrees. Leo heard his grandmother's voice somewhere in the back of his mind. Faint now. Getting fainter. Don't you ever let nobody make you feel small. Baby. You're just as good as anybody walking this earth. But he felt small now. Smaller than he'd ever felt. Shrinking under her gaze. Under her words. Under the weight of everything he'd lost and everything he'd become. Get out of my sight. Patricia Wellington said. Before I have you exterminated. Leo stumbled backward. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped the sandwich. 3 days of food, maybe more, falling onto the pristine concrete of Sterling Plaza. He didn't pick it up. He couldn't. He just needed to get away. To disappear. To find somewhere dark and quiet where he could breathe again. But he wasn't fast enough. Rusty chose that moment to poke his head out of Leo's jacket. Just for a second. Just to see what was happening. The dog's worried eyes appeared in the gap of the zipper. His small nose twitching. His one floppy ear catching the light. Patricia saw him, and something in her face went from cold to cruel. Oh, look at that. Vermin carrying vermin. She stepped closer. Her dog, the tiny, trembling poodle, let out a small yip, but Patricia ignored it. Her attention was fixed on Leo. On the small life he was trying to protect. On the vulnerability she'd found and could not resist exploiting. That thing probably has diseases. Fleas. Rabies, for all we know. He doesn't. Leo's voice cracked. He's not. Did I ask you to speak? Leo went silent. That animal shouldn't be in public. None of this. She gestured at all of Leo, at everything he was should be in public. This is a respectable establishment. This is where people come to enjoy themselves. Not to be assaulted by the sight of. She couldn't even finish the sentence. Like what Leo was defied description. Like he was so far beneath her that words themselves refused to apply. And then she kicked. It happened fast. One moment Patricia was standing there. Her face twisted with disgust. Her designer heel catching the light. The next moment, that heel was swinging forward. She aimed for Rusty. The pointed toe of her shoe connected with the small lump beneath Leo's jacket. The sound was wrong, hard and soft at the same time, leather against flesh against bone. Rusty yelped. The sound split something open in Leo. A raw, primal, desperate sound that erupted from his throat without permission, without thought, without anything except pure animal terror. He screamed. And then he did the only thing he could do. The only thing that mattered. The only thing that 3 months of survival and 9 years of love had taught him to do. He threw his body over Rusty. He curled around the dog, wrapping himself into a ball, making himself a shield. His back was exposed. His head was tucked. His arms were locked around the trembling, whimpering creature beneath his jacket. I won't let them hurt you. I won't let them hurt you. I won't let. The second kick came. This one wasn't aimed at Rusty. Patricia's heel caught Leo square in the ribs. The pain was immediate, explosive, white-hot. He felt something shift inside him, not break, not quite, but close. Close enough that breathing suddenly became a conscious effort. A battle. A choice. He didn't make a sound. Not because he was brave. Not because he was strong. But because all of his sound was already spent. All of his voice was used up on that first scream. There was nothing left except pain and fear and the desperate, clinging need to protect the only family he had left. That's what you get. Patricia was saying somewhere above him. That's what animals get when they don't know their place. Someone should call animal control. Someone should. But Leo wasn't listening anymore. He was somewhere else. He was in his grandmother's kitchen, and she was singing hymns while the bread rose. He was in his bed, and she was tucking the covers around him. Her hand on his forehead. Checking for fever. Finding only love. He was walking to school, and she was squeezing his hand at the corner, telling him to be good, telling him she'd be there when he got home, telling him, I love you more than the whole sky, baby. I love you too, Grandma. More than the whole sky. Rusty was still whimpering. Leo was still curled around him. The concrete was cold against his cheek. His ribs were screaming. His eyes were streaming tears that cut clean tracks through the dirt on his face. And then, a sound. A rumble. Distant at first, like thunder rolling in from somewhere far away. But growing. Spreading. Getting louder. Closer. Bigger. Leo felt it before he heard it. A vibration in the ground. A trembling in the air. A heartbeat that wasn't his own. He raised his head. Just slightly. Just enough to see. And what he saw changed everything. 20 motorcycles turned into Sterling Plaza. Heavy. Loud. Imposing. Chrome catching the sunlight like warnings. Engines growling like something ancient and powerful had just woken up. The sound was overwhelming, glorious, terrifying in its magnitude. It wasn't just noise. It was presence. It was power made audible. It was fury and loyalty and something else that Leo couldn't name but could feel in his bones. The polite sounds of the plaza, the murmured conversations, the click of heels, the gentle music piped through hidden speakers, all of it disappeared. All of it drowned beneath that relentless, rolling thunder. The riders were massive. All of them. Leather vests and worn denim and road dust and patches that meant something Leo didn't understand but could sense the weight of. They moved like a unit, like a single organism. Their bikes cutting through the parking lot with the precision of something practiced, something instinctive. At the head of the pack was the biggest one of all. He sat on a chrome beast of a machine, his hands steady on the handlebars, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses. His beard was gray at the edges. His shoulders were broad enough to block out the sun. His arms were covered in tattoos that told stories Leo couldn't read but could feel the weight of. He looked like the kind of man who had seen everything dark the world had to offer. And hadn't blinked. The bikes cut their engines simultaneously. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. 20 men sat on 20 machines, their eyes scanning the plaza, taking in the scene with the kind of attention that missed nothing. The well-dressed woman standing over a small figure on the ground, the tiny dog trembling in a shopping bag, the curious shoppers who'd stopped to stare. The security guard talking urgently into his radio, the boy curled in a ball on the concrete, blood seeping through his hoodie where the fabric had torn. The leader's head turned. His hidden eyes found Leo. Something in his body changed. Attention. A focus. The shift from casual awareness to absolute attention. He swung off his bike. His boots hit the concrete. And the sound was like a period at the end of a sentence. Final. Definite. Decisive. He walked toward Leo. Patricia Wellington was still standing there. Still in the middle of her rant. Still performing her disgust for anyone who would watch. She didn't notice the approaching giant until his shadow fell over her, blocking out the sun. She turned. And for the first time in her perfectly manicured life, Patricia Wellington found herself looking up at someone who was not impressed. Patricia Wellington was still talking. Her mouth was moving, words were coming out, but they'd stopped meaning anything the moment that shadow fell across her face. She turned, irritated, ready to dismiss whoever had dared interrupt her moment of righteous fury. She looked up. And up. Bishop stood 2 feet away. His arms were crossed over his chest. The leather of his vest creaking slightly with the movement. His face was unreadable behind those dark glasses. His body was absolutely still in the way that dangerous things are still, the calm before the strike, the silence before the thunder. Behind him, 19 men had formed a semicircle. They hadn't planned it, they hadn't discussed it, they'd simply moved into position the way wolves move when they've found something worth surrounding. Their faces were grim masks of controlled fury. Their eyes were fixed on Patricia with the kind of attention that made her designer dress suddenly feel very, very thin. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across Patricia's face. Fear, maybe. Recognition that she was outnumbered, outweighed, out of her depth. But Patricia Wellington had spent her entire adult life believing that money was armor. That wealth was a wall nothing could breach. That the right name and the right address and the right connections meant the rules were different for her. So she made the worst decision of her life. She smiled. Thank God you're here. Her voice shifted into something that was meant to be charming, authoritative, the tone of a woman giving instructions to the help. This refuse is bothering customers. Remove him. She gestured at Leo. Still curled on the ground, still bleeding, still clutching his dog like it was the only real thing left in the world. I don't know how it got in here. But it needs to go. Now. Before it bothers anyone else. She thought they were security. She thought they were on her side. She thought the leather and the tattoos and the rough faces meant they were exactly the kind of men who would do what wealthy women told them to do. She had never been more wrong about anything in her entire life. Bishop didn't even look at her. It was the most devastating dismissal Patricia had ever experienced. Worse than being yelled at. Worse than being insulted. Being ignored. Being treated like she wasn't worth the effort of a response. But Bishop wasn't thinking about Patricia Wellington. He was looking at the boy. Leo was still on the ground. Still curled around Rusty. Still trembling with pain and fear and the exhaustion of 3 months spent surviving instead of living. His eyes were squeezed shut, his arms were locked around the small, shivering shape beneath his jacket. His whole body was braced for the next blow. Bishop felt something crack open in his chest. He'd seen a lot of things in his 53 years on this earth. He'd seen men hurt each other in ways that would keep most people up at night. He'd seen loyalty and betrayal, courage and cowardice, the best and worst that human beings had to offer. But there was something about a child that got to him. There was always something about a child. He walked past Patricia like she wasn't there. Crossed the distance to Leo in 3 long strides. And then, slowly, carefully, he lowered himself to one knee. The concrete was hard against his bones. He was too old for this. His knees complained. But he didn't care. He needed to be at this boy's level. He needed to see his face. He needed this child to know that not every adult in the world was someone to fear. Hey! His voice came out softer than he expected. Softer than it had been in years. Like something rusty being oiled. Like a door that hadn't opened in a long time finally swinging wide. Hey, little man. You can open your eyes. Nobody's gonna hurt you now. Leo's eyes opened. They were brown. Deep brown. Like coffee. Like earth. Like the kind of warmth that should be safe in a grandmother's kitchen instead of bleeding on a plaza floor. They were wet with tears that cut clean tracks through the dirt on his face. They were full of fear, yes, but something else too. Something that looked like a question. Something that looked like the faintest, most fragile hope. He hurt bad? Bishop asked, nodding toward the lump beneath Leo's jacket. Your dog. He hurt bad? Little man? Leo's throat worked. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. She kicked him. She kicked Rusty. I saw. She said. Broke, reformed. She said we belong with the garbage. Something in Bishop's jaw tightened. Something in his eyes went dark behind those glasses. But his voice stayed gentle. Stayed soft. Stayed the kind of voice that men use when they have nothing to prove and everything to protect. What's your name, son? Leo. Leo. That's a good name. Strong name. Leo didn't say anything. He just stared at this massive stranger who was kneeling on the concrete like it was the most natural thing in the world. Who was talking to him like he mattered. Who was looking at him like he was a person instead of a problem. It reminded him of something. A feeling. A tone. The way men used to talk to him before everything fell apart. Mr. Patterson from their building, who fixed the sink when it broke and always called Leo young man like it was a title he'd earned. Pastor Williams from their church, who shook Leo's hand every Sunday like they were equals. His grandmother's friends, the old men who sat on the porch and told stories and never raised their voices because they didn't need to. Men who spoke softly because they had nothing to prove. Bishop was looking at Leo, but he was seeing something else too. He was seeing himself. 44 years ago. Different city, different circumstances, same fear, same hunger. Same desperate need to be invisible because being seen meant being hurt. He was seeing every kid he couldn't save before he learned how to fight. Every child who'd slipped through the cracks while he was too young, too weak, too lost in his own survival to help anyone else. He was seeing the reason he wore this patch. The reason he'd spent 3 decades building something that most people didn't understand but that kids like Leo needed more than anything in the world. A wall. A shield. A family that chose you when blood wouldn't. All right, Leo, Bishop said quietly. Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna stay right here. You're gonna let my friend look at you. Make sure nothing's broken. And you're gonna trust me when I tell you that lady is never gonna touch you again. Okay? Leo nodded. He didn't know why he trusted this stranger. He just did. Sometimes you just know. Bishop stood up. The movement was slow. Deliberate. The kind of slow that's more threatening than fast because it says I don't need to hurry. I have all the time in the world, and when I'm done standing, you're going to wish I'd stayed down. He turned to face Patricia Wellington. The shift in his demeanor was terrifying. One moment he'd been gentle, soft, the kind of presence that made a scared child feel safe. The next moment he was something else entirely. Something cold, something controlled, something that looked at Patricia like she was the smallest, most pathetic thing he'd ever seen. You kicked a 9-year-old boy. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You kicked his dog. Because they were hungry. Patricia's chin came up. Her armor was back in place. Or so she thought. Her voice was sharp. Indignant. The voice of a woman who had never faced consequences for anything. Do you know who my husband is? Don't care. Gerald Wellington. Wellington Development. He built half the commercial real estate in this city. He plays golf with the mayor. He. Still don't care. Patricia's face flushed. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This wasn't how people talked to her. This wasn't. I can buy and sell every single one of you greasy thugs. The words came out hot, desperate, a woman reaching for the only weapon she knew. That boy is a vagrant. A criminal. He belongs in a cage. Bishop laughed. It was the worst sound Patricia had ever heard. Dry. Humorless. Empty of anything except contempt. Lady, you got it twisted. He took one step closer. Patricia took one step back. She didn't mean to. Her body did it without permission. You think you're royalty because of what's in your bank account. You think that makes you better than a hungry kid trying to feed his dog. You think that gives you the right to kick a child. Another step forward. Another step back. But out here? In the real world? Where money doesn't buy your way out of being a garbage human being. He stopped. Leaned in. Close enough that she could smell the leather and road dust. Close enough that she could see her own reflection in his dark glasses. You're the lowest thing walking. Patricia's hand was shaking as she pulled out her phone. She couldn't think straight. Couldn't breathe right. Couldn't understand how her perfect day had turned into this nightmare. I'm calling the police. I'll have you all arrested for menacing. For harassment. Call him. Bishop stepped back. Crossed his arms. The other bikers hadn't moved. Hadn't spoken, they just stood there. A wall of leather and controlled fury. Watching Patricia with eyes that had seen worse than her and hadn't blinked. Call the cops, lady. We'll wait. While Patricia fumbled with her phone. Something else was happening. A man had separated from the group of bikers. He was big, they all were, but softer somehow. Rounder. His beard was full and dark, his eyes were kind behind small glasses that seemed too delicate for his face. His vest said TINY in patches across the back, which would have been funny if anything about this moment was funny. He approached Leo slowly. Carefully. The way you approach a wounded animal that might bolt. Hey there, little man. I'm tiny. I know. He gestured at his massive frame. Ironic? Right? My mama had a sense of humor. Leo didn't smile. But something in his body unclenched. Just slightly. Just enough. Bishop asked me to check on you. Make sure you're okay. I'm not gonna hurt you. I just want to look. All right? Can I do that? Leo nodded. Tiny knelt beside him, his movements gentle despite his size. His hands huge. Scarred. Calloused from years of work touched Leo's ribs with a tenderness that seemed impossible. Leo flinched anyway. Sorry. I know. That hurts. Can you breathe okay? Take a deep breath for me. Leo tried. It hurt, but he could do it. Good. That's good. Ribs are probably bruised, maybe cracked, but nothing shifted. You're tough, you know that? Leo didn't feel tough. He felt broken. But he nodded anyway. What about your buddy? Tiny gestured toward the lump still pressed against Leo's chest. Can I see him? Leo hesitated. Rusty was his. Rusty was the only thing he had left. The only promise he'd managed to keep. But this man had kind eyes. And Leo was so tired of being alone. He opened his jacket. Rusty poked his head out, whimpering softly. There was a mark on his side where Patricia's heel had connected. The fur was matted. But he was breathing. He was alive. He was looking at Leo with those worried eyes that said, "Are we safe now?" "Hey there, little guy." Tiny's voice went even softer. "That's a good boy. Good dog. Let me see." His hands moved over Rusty with practiced care. Checking for breaks. Checking for internal damage. Checking for all the things that a street dog and a homeless boy shouldn't have to worry about but did. He's okay. Bruised, probably sore, but okay. You protected him good. Something in Leo's chest released. A tension he'd been holding so tight he'd forgotten it was there. He's all I got. The words came out before Leo could stop them. And once they started, they wouldn't stop. My grandma died. 3 months ago. She was sick for a while, but she kept saying she was fine. Kept saying she'd be okay. Kept saying we'd figure it out. But she wasn't fine. She died and they put her in the ground and I didn't even get to say goodbye because they said I was too young for the funeral. Tiny didn't say anything, just listened. Just let the words come. And then the landlord came. He said we owed money. He said Grandma was behind on rent. He changed the locks while I was at school and when I got home, all her stuff was on the curb. My stuff too. Everything. Just sitting there in the rain. More bikers were listening now. Moving closer. Their faces had changed from fury to something else. Something raw. I tried to find help. I tried to tell people. But every time I told someone, they wanted to call CPS. And CPS said I had to go to a foster home. And the foster home said I couldn't bring Rusty. Leo's voice cracked. Broke. Reformed. I promised her. My grandma. Before she died. She made me promise. She said. His eyes squeezed shut. Tears leaked through anyway. She said, Leo, baby, promise me 3 things. Stay in school. Always tell the truth. And never abandon something that needs you. He opened his eyes. Looked down at Rusty. Looked at this small, scruffy, broken thing that had become his whole world. Rusty needed me. I couldn't leave him. I promised. Around him, the bikers were reacting. Each in their own way. Bishop's jaw was so tight the muscles were visible. His hands were fists at his sides. His whole body was rigid with the effort of not exploding. Tiny's eyes had gone wet behind his glasses. He was blinking rapidly, trying to hold it together, not quite succeeding. A younger biker, tall, lean, with fire in his eyes and decon on his vest, had turned away. He was walking in tight circles, his hands on his head, breathing hard. Too angry to speak. Too angry to stand still. An older biker, gray ponytail, weathered face, hawk stitched above his heart, had removed his sunglasses. His eyes were the saddest Leo had ever seen. Eyes that had witnessed this before, eyes that knew exactly how this story usually ended. How long? Hawk's voice was quiet. How long you been out here alone, son? 3 months. 12 days. The number landed like a physical blow. 3 months. 12 days. 94 days of sleeping in alleys and doorways. 94 days of eating garbage and dodging adults and hiding from the system that was supposed to help him. 94 days of being 9 years old and completely, utterly alone. Except for a dog who needed him. Except for a promise he refused to break. The sirens cut through everything. 2 squad cars pulled into Sterling Plaza, lights flashing, tires crunching on the pristine pavement. They stopped at angles, the way cops always stop: aggressive, territorial, ready. The doors opened. 4 officers emerged. And then they saw the scene. 20 massive bikers in leather vests surrounding a wealthy white woman in designer clothes and a homeless black child bleeding on the ground. Their hands went to their holsters. Everyone stay where you are. The lead officer was already moving forward. His partner flanking him. The other 2 hanging back with their hands on their weapons. His eyes were scanning the scene, making calculations, drawing conclusions. 20 bikers. Potential gang activity. Threat assessment. High. 1 wealthy woman. Victim profile, obvious. Protection priority, immediate. 1 black child. Status. Unclear. Probably the reason for the disturbance. Probably the problem. The systemic bias was invisible and everywhere. It was in the way the officers positioned themselves between Patricia and the bikers. It was in the way they ignored Leo entirely. It was in the way their hands stayed on their weapons even though not a single biker had moved. Patricia saw her opening. She transformed. The hard, cruel woman who had kicked a child 5 minutes ago disappeared. In her place was someone soft, trembling, afraid. Her voice shook. Her eyes filled with tears, crocodile tears, manufactured on demand, the kind of tears that wealthy white women had been using as weapons for centuries. Officers, thank God you're here. She pressed a manicured hand to her chest. These men have been threatening me. Surrounding me. I was just trying to enjoy my afternoon and that boy, she pointed at Leo, her finger trembling with fake fear. That boy attacked my dog. And when I tried to defend myself, these thugs showed up and she let out a sob. A perfect, practiced sob. I've never been so scared in my life. The lead officer's expression hardened. He turned toward Bishop. Sir, I'm going to need you to put your hands where I can see them. Slowly. They haven't done anything. Leo's voice was small. So small. But it cut through anyway. She's lying. She kicked me. She kicked Rusty. They just. Son, I need you to be quiet. The officer didn't even look at him. Didn't even acknowledge that he'd spoken. Leo felt the world tilting. He'd been here before. Not this exact moment, but this feeling. The feeling of being invisible. The feeling of watching truth lose to power. The feeling of knowing how this was going to end and being helpless to stop it. The officers were moving toward Bishop now. One of them had pulled out handcuffs. Another was reaching for his radio, calling for backup probably, calling for more cars, more officers, more weight to throw against these men who'd committed the crime of protecting a child. Leo saw the handcuffs. He knew what came next. He'd dodged this moment for 3 months. He'd hidden and run and made himself invisible specifically to avoid this moment. And now it was here. Now it was happening, and he was too tired, too hurt, too broken to run anymore. They would take him. They would put him in the system. They would send him to some facility where Rusty wasn't allowed. They would break the only promise he'd managed to keep, and there was nothing he could do. Tears streamed down his face. Silent tears. He'd learned that crying loudly drew attention. He'd learned that begging made things worse. He'd learned that sometimes all you could do was be quiet and invisible and hope the storm passed. But this storm wasn't going to pass. This storm was going to swallow him whole. Bishop didn't move. His hands were still at his sides. His body was still relaxed. His face was still unreadable behind those dark glasses. Everything about him said I'm not a threat, even though everything about him could have been a threat if he'd chosen to be. Officer. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade through butter. Calm. Controlled. Absolute. The lead officer paused. His hand was on his cuffs. His partner was reaching for Bishop's arm. They were seconds away from an arrest that would turn this whole situation into something much, much worse. Officer, before you do something you can't take back, I need you to do two things. Sir, I need you to. Ramirez, isn't it? The officer stopped. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Marcus Ramirez. We met about 6 years ago. That situation on Holbrook Street. The thing with the Henderson kid. Officer Ramirez's expression shifted. The aggression didn't disappear, but something else crept in alongside it. Memory. Caution. The awareness that maybe this situation wasn't as simple as it looked. I remember you, Ramirez said slowly. Steel Guardians. You helped us find that missing girl. I did. And right now I'm trying to help this boy. So I need you to do two things before you make any decisions. The plaza was silent. Everyone watching. Everyone waiting. Patricia's fake tears had dried up. She was watching Bishop with something that looked almost like fear. First thing, check the security camera on that jewelry store. Bishop nodded toward the storefront Patricia had emerged from. It's got a clear angle on everything that happened here in the last 10 minutes. Ramirez glanced at the store. At the camera mounted above the entrance. At the angle that would have captured everything. Second thing, check the kid's ribs. Right side. About here. Bishop touched his own ribcage. You're gonna find a bruise. And that bruise is gonna be shaped exactly like the heel of that lady's very expensive shoe. Patricia's face went white. That's ridiculous. Her voice had lost its trembling quality. It was sharp now. Defensive. Scared. He attacked me. He attacked my dog. I was defending myself against Uff. Ma'am. I need you to be quiet. Ramirez wasn't looking at Patricia anymore. He was looking at Leo. Really looking, maybe for the first time since he'd arrived. Seeing the blood on the hoodie. The tear tracks through the dirt. The way this child was curled around a shivering dog like it was the only thing keeping him alive. He made a decision. Torres, stay with these gentlemen. Nobody moves, nobody gets jumpy. He walked toward the jewelry store. The seconds stretched into minutes. Minutes that felt like hours. Everyone standing in that plaza, frozen in place, waiting to see which way the world was going to tilt. Leo watched Officer Ramirez disappear through the jewelry store doors. He watched the other officers standing guard, their hands still near their weapons. He watched Bishop, standing there like a mountain, unmoving, unworried, certain in a way Leo had never been certain of anything. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. The jewelry store door opened. Ramirez emerged. His expression had changed. The professional neutrality was gone. In its place was something cold. Something angry. Something that looked a lot like the expression the bikers had been wearing since they arrived. He walked past Bishop without looking at him. He walked past the other officers. He walked directly to Patricia Wellington. Ma'am. I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. Patricia's mouth fell open. Excuse me? You're under arrest for assault on a minor and animal cruelty. This is absurd. Do you know who my husband? Ma'am. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Now. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound Leo had ever heard. Patricia Wellington screamed. Not in fear. In disbelief. In outrage. In the absolute inability to comprehend that the rules she'd lived by her entire life had suddenly stopped applying. You can't do this to me. I'll have your badge. I'll have all of your badges. My husband will destroy every single one of. Ramirez guided her toward the squad car. Not roughly. Not gently either. Just. Efficiently. The way you handle something unpleasant that needs to be dealt with. Leo watched from the ground as Patricia Wellington was placed in the back of a police car. He watched her face through the window, red, twisted, ugly with fury and disbelief. And he remembered something his grandmother used to say. The Lord sees everything, baby. Everything comes back around. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, everybody gets what they earned. He wondered if she could see this. He wondered if, wherever she was, she knew that the woman who'd kicked her grandson was sitting in the back of a police car with handcuffs on her wrists. He hoped she could. He hoped she was smiling. The squad car pulled away. Patricia Wellington's screams faded into the distance. Swallowed by sirens and engine noise and the simple indifference of a world that had finally stopped caring about her opinion, Sterling Plaza went quiet. The shoppers who'd gathered to watch were dispersing now. Murmuring to each other. Already composing the story they'd tell at dinner parties. You won't believe what I saw today. The security guard who'd called the police was talking into his radio, probably explaining to someone why his pristine plaza now had blood on the concrete. The normal sounds of commerce were slowly returning: the click of heels, the murmur of conversations, the distant music from speakers hidden in decorative planters. But the bikers hadn't moved. 20 men still stood in their formation around Leo. 20 men who had somewhere else to be, something else to do, lives that didn't include a 9-year-old boy bleeding on the ground outside a jewelry store. They could leave now. The crisis was over. The bad guy, bad woman was in custody. Justice had been served. They'd done their good deed for the day. Bishop looked at his brothers. They looked back at him, and everyone knew that leaving wasn't an option. Bishop walked back to Leo. The boy was still on the ground, still clutching Rusty, still trembling with exhaustion and pain and the slow dawning realization that something had shifted, that the world had tilted in a direction he hadn't expected. Bishop crouched down again. His knees protested, they always did now, but he ignored them. Some things mattered more than comfort. Leo. The boy looked up. Those brown eyes, still wet, still scared, but with something else in them now, something that looked almost like curiosity. You got somewhere to go, little man? Leo's throat worked. He shook his head. A small movement. Barely visible. You got anybody? Any family at all? Another shake. Smaller this time. Like even the admission hurt. Bishop was quiet for a moment. He looked at this child, filthy, injured, clutching a wounded dog like it was the only real thing left in the world. He looked at 9 years of life that had already seen more loss than most people experienced in 50. He looked at himself. 44 years ago. Before someone had done for him what he was about to do for this boy. He turned to his brothers. Met their eyes one by one. Tiny. Deacon. Hawk. All the others whose names Leo didn't know yet but would learn. Something passed between them. A conversation without words. A decision made in the space between heartbeats. Bishop turned back to Leo. You do now. 3 words. 4 syllables. Everything. Leo didn't understand at first. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Because people didn't say things like that and mean them. People didn't look at homeless kids and see anything worth keeping. People didn't. What? You got family now. Bishop's voice was steady. Certain. The kind of certain that doesn't leave room for doubt. You're coming with us. You and your dog. We're gonna get you cleaned up, get you fed, get you somewhere safe. And then we're gonna figure out the rest. Leo's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. But. Why? Bishop smiled. It transformed his face, softened the hard lines. Warmed the cold edges. Made him look like someone's father. Someone's grandfather. Someone who had learned that strength wasn't about fists and fury, but about showing up when it mattered. Because that's what we do, little man. We protect people who need protecting. And right now? You need protecting. Leo felt something crack open in his chest. He hadn't belonged anywhere in 3 months. Hadn't been claimed by anyone. Hadn't had a single person look at him and say you're mine in any way that mattered. He'd been invisible, disposable, a problem to be solved or ignored, depending on who was looking, but these men were looking at him like he was something else. Something worth keeping. Something worth fighting for. You do now. He didn't trust it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for the first time in 94 days, Leo felt something he'd forgotten existed. Hope. The ride was like nothing Leo had ever experienced. He sat behind Bishop on the massive touring bike, his small arms wrapped around the man's waist, his face pressed against the leather of his vest. The engine vibrated through his whole body, a deep, steady rumble that felt like a heartbeat, like being held by something powerful and alive. Rusty was tucked into a padded saddlebag, the lid propped open so he could see Leo. The dog's worried eyes never left the boy's face. I'm here. You're here. We're okay. The wind was warm against Leo's skin. It smelled like gasoline and road dust and something else, freedom, maybe, movement. The feeling of going somewhere instead of hiding in place. Around them, 19 other bikes formed a protective formation. Leo was surrounded on all sides by chrome and leather and the roar of engines that seemed to say nothing can touch you while we're here. His grandmother used to take him on the city bus. The memory came unbidden, sharp and sweet. She'd always get the window seat for him. She'd point at things as they passed: the mural on the liquor store wall, the park where she used to play as a girl, the church where she'd gotten married to a man Leo had never met because he died before Leo was born. She'd make up stories about the people they saw. That woman in the red coat? She's a secret spy. That man with the briefcase? He's carrying $1 million in there. That kid on the skateboard? He's practicing for the Olympics. Leo used to laugh at her stories. Used to add his own details. Used to feel like the city bus was a magic carpet taking them on adventures. He hadn't ridden anything since she died. Hadn't gone anywhere. Hadn't felt the movement of being carried towards something instead of running away from everything. This was different from the bus. Louder. Faster. More alive. But the feeling was the same. The feeling of going somewhere. The feeling of being with someone. The feeling of not being alone. Leo closed his eyes and let the wind wash over him. For just a moment, just a few miles, he let himself pretend that everything was going to be okay. The clubhouse wasn't fancy. It was a converted warehouse on the industrial side of the city, surrounded by chain-link fencing and gravel parking lots. The building was weathered, practical, the kind of place that looked like it had seen some things and didn't care if you knew it. But it was warm. That was the first thing Leo noticed when Bishop helped him off the bike and led him through the heavy front door. The warmth wrapped around him like a blanket, not just physical heat, although that was there too, but something else. Something in the way people looked up when they entered. Something in the way conversations paused and heads nodded and faces shifted into expressions that said, "You're welcome here." "This is Leo," Bishop announced to the room. "He's staying with us for a while, treat him right." That was it. No explanation. No story. Just an introduction and an expectation. And everyone accepted it. A woman appeared, tattoos running up both arms. Gray streaks in her dark hair. Kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. She wrapped a blanket around Leo's shoulders without asking if he was cold. He was. He hadn't realized how cold he'd been until suddenly he wasn't. Someone else pressed a plate of food into his hands. Real food. Hot food. Fried chicken and mashed potatoes and greens and cornbread that smelled like his grandmother's kitchen. Leo stared at it like it might disappear if he looked away. "Eat," the woman said. "You look like you need it." A bowl of water appeared on the floor for Rusty. The dog lapped at it desperately, his tail wagging for the first time in days. People moved around Leo with purpose. Not crowding him. Not overwhelming him. Just being there. Present. Available. He didn't know their names yet. Didn't know their stories. Didn't know why they were willing to take in a homeless kid they'd met an hour ago. But for the first time in 3 months, Leo wasn't invisible. For the first time in 3 months, he was somewhere he was supposed to be. Tiny led him to the back of the clubhouse. Past the main room with its pool tables and worn couches. Past the kitchen where someone was already cooking more food. Past offices and storage rooms and a hallway lined with photographs of men on motorcycles, some young and grinning, some older and serious. Some just faces that looked out from frames with the weight of being remembered. The bathroom was small but clean. White tiles. A shower with a glass door. Clean towels stacked on a shelf. A bar of soap that smelled like pine. "Take your time, little man," Tiny said from the doorway. "Nobody's rushing you. There's clothes outside. When you're done they're clean, they should fit close enough. Anything you need, just holler." He paused. His big, kind face was serious. "And Leo? It's okay if you need to. Let some things out. Nobody's gonna judge you for that. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is feel what you're feeling." "Okay?" Leo nodded. He didn't trust his voice. Tiny closed the door. And Leo was alone. For the first time in 3 months, he was alone in a space that was safe, warm, private, a space where nothing was watching him, nothing was hunting him, nothing was waiting for him to let his guard down so it could hurt him. He stood there for a long moment, just breathing. Just existing. Just letting the reality of safety settle into his bones. Then he turned on the shower. The water took a moment to warm up. He watched it fall, testing the temperature with his hand the way his grandmother used to test it with her elbow. "Don't want you getting burned, baby. Don't want you getting cold either. Got to find that sweet spot." The water turned warm. Then hot. Steam started rising. Fogging the mirror. Filling the small space with moisture and heat. Leo stepped in. The water hit his skin and it was like being baptized. Clean. Warm. Endless. Not the cold splash from a gas station sink. Not the lukewarm trickle from a park fountain. Real water. Endless water. Water that kept coming and coming. Washing away 3 months of dirt and fear and hiding. He watched the water run off his body. Gray at first. Brown. Carrying away the streets and the alleys and the dumpsters and all the places he'd hidden to survive. Carrying away the visible evidence of everything he'd endured. He should have felt better. He should have felt relieved. Instead, something cracked. It started as a tremor. A shaking in his hands that spread to his arms, his shoulders, his whole body. He pressed his palms against the tile, trying to steady himself, but the shaking wouldn't stop. And then the tears came. Not silent tears. Not controlled tears. Not the kind of crying he'd learned to do in doorways and alleys. Muffled against his arm so no one would hear. This was different. This was everything. 3 months of survival. 3 months of hiding. 3 months of watching and waiting and fighting for every scrap of food, every safe corner, every moment of rest. 3 months of being so focused on not dying that he'd forgotten how to feel anything else. His grandmother was dead. The thought hit him like a physical blow. He'd known it, of course he'd known it, but he hadn't felt it. Hadn't had time to feel it. Hadn't had safety enough to grieve. His grandmother was dead and she was never coming back. She was never going to make bread on Saturday mornings again. Never going to test the bathwater with her elbow. Never going to sing hymns while she cooked or tell him stories on the bus or hold his face in her hands and say I love you more than the whole sky, baby. She was gone. And he was alone. Had been alone. Would always carry that aloneness inside him, even when he wasn't alone anymore. Leo slid down the tile wall. He sat on the floor of the shower, the water pouring over him, and he cried like he hadn't cried since the night she died. Great, heaving sobs that racked his whole body. His hand pressed over his mouth trying to muffle the sound, but it didn't work. It wouldn't work. There was too much. Too much grief. Too much fear. Too much of everything he'd been holding back. She used to give him baths. When he was little. Before he was old enough to shower by himself. She'd run the water and test it with her elbow and lower him in gently, her hands strong and warm and certain. She'd wash his hair, her fingers working through the tangles. Humming hymns under her breath. Songs about grace and mercy and a God who loved even the smallest sparrows. You're my favorite person in the whole world. She used to say. Did you know that? My favorite person. More than Grandpa? More than Grandpa. More than anybody. You're my heart walking around outside my body, baby. Don't you ever forget that. He hadn't forgotten. He would never forget. And that was why it hurt so much. Outside the bathroom door. Tiny sat on the floor with his back against the wall. He heard everything. The sobs. The gasps. The raw, broken sounds of a child finally allowing himself to feel. He didn't knock. Didn't interrupt. Didn't try to fix it. Some things can't be fixed. Some things just need to be felt. So Tiny sat there, a massive man with tears running down his own face, and he let Leo cry, let him grieve, let him empty out all the pain he'd been carrying so that maybe, eventually, there'd be room for something else. Something like healing. When Leo finally emerged, his eyes were swollen and his nose was running and he felt hollowed out in a way that was terrible and wonderful at the same time. Empty. But clean. There was a pile of clothes on a chair outside the bathroom. Jeans that looked close to his size. A t-shirt with a faded logo. A hoodie that was blue instead of gray. Socks without holes. Sneakers that actually fit. They weren't new. Leo could tell. They'd belonged to someone else before him. Someone's kid, probably. Someone who'd outgrown them or moved on. But they were clean. And they weren't torn. And when Leo put them on, he caught a glimpse of himself in the hallway mirror. He stopped. The boy looking back at him wasn't the same boy who'd been digging through a trash can 3 hours ago. That boy had been dirty, desperate, invisible. That boy had looked like a problem. This boy just looked like a kid. A regular kid with clean clothes and damp hair and eyes that were still red from crying but also somehow lighter. Like some weight had been lifted. Looking sharp. Little man. Leo turned. Deacon was leaning against the wall, grinning. The young biker still had fire in his eyes, but it was banked now. Under control. Aimed at the world in general instead of at any specific target. Come on. Bishop wants to talk to you about what happens next. What happens next? Leo followed Deacon down the hallway. And for the first time in 3 months, those words didn't fill him with dread. Bishop's office was a mess. Papers everywhere. Photos on the walls, rides, rallies, group shots of men in leather vests with their arms around each other. A map with pins stuck in it, marking locations Leo didn't understand. A desk buried under documents and coffee cups and motorcycle parts. Bishop sat behind the desk, his massive frame making the chair look small. His dark glasses were off now, set on a stack of papers, and Leo could finally see his eyes. They were tired. Kind. Old in a way that had nothing to do with age. Sit down, Leo. You too, Rusty. Leo sat in the chair across from the desk. Rusty jumped into his lap immediately, settling in with a sigh. Bishop leaned forward. His hands were folded on the desk, the tattoos on his knuckles spelling words Leo couldn't quite read. Here's the situation. You're 9 years old. You've been on the street for 3 months. That means the system is looking for you. CPS. Probably police too. When a kid disappears from school and nobody reports them to foster care, people notice eventually. Leo tensed. His arms tightened around Rusty. Easy. Bishop held up a hand. I'm not turning you over to anybody. That's not what this is. But we need to do this right. Get you legal protection. Make sure nobody can take you somewhere you don't want to go. He looked at Rusty. And make sure nobody takes him. Either. Leo's voice was small. How? Bishop smiled. It was a real smile this time. Warm. Confident. I know a lawyer. She owes me a favor. Actually, she owes me about 12 favors. He leaned back in his chair. We're gonna find you a home, Leo. A real one. With people who want you. People who'll let you keep your dog. People who'll treat you like you deserve to be treated. Leo's chest felt tight. And until we find them? You stay here. With us. You eat here. You sleep here. You're safe here. For as long as it takes. A real home. The words hit Leo somewhere deep. Somewhere he'd locked away months ago because wanting things hurt too much when you couldn't have them. Somewhere that ached with the memory of what he'd lost and the terror of hoping for something he might lose again. A real home. With people who wanted him. It felt dangerous. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and being told to jump because someone would catch you. But Bishop's eyes were steady. And the bikers had already caught him once. Okay, Leo whispered. It was the smallest word. But it was the biggest leap he'd ever taken. The next 2 weeks were war. Not the kind with guns and violence. The kind with paperwork and phone calls and meetings that lasted hours and ended with nothing resolved. Sandra Chen was Bishop's lawyer. She was small. Fierce. And looked like she'd been born arguing. Her office was neat where Bishop's was chaotic. Her suits were sharp where his leather was worn. And her eyes had the same fire that Leo saw in the bikers, the look of someone who'd decided what was right and would burn down anything that stood in the way. Here's what we're dealing with, she said at their first meeting, spreading papers across her desk. Leo's grandmother died without a will. No designated guardian. The state considers him a ward with no legal placement, which means CPS has jurisdiction. And CPS means foster care. Bishop said. Which means shelters that won't take his dog. Exactly. Plus there's this. Sandra slid a document across the desk. The landlord who evicted Leo is claiming the eviction was legal and that Leo abandoned the property. He's already rented it to someone else. All of Leo's grandmother's belongings are gone. Leo felt sick. His grandmother's things. Her photos. Her Bible. The quilt she'd made when Leo was born. Gone. Bishop's jaw tightened. That landlord got a name? Bishop. I'm just asking. I know what you're asking. And I'm telling you, let me handle this the legal way first. What followed was a crash course in how the system worked and how to make it work for you instead of against you. Sandra filed injunctions. Emergency motions. Requests for temporary custody assignment that would let Leo stay with the Steel Guardians while his case was processed. Bishop pulled strings with contacts in social services. Men and women he'd helped over the years. People who owed him favors. People who remembered what he'd done for their kids, their neighborhoods, their communities. Club members showed up for every court appearance. Every meeting. Every bureaucratic hoop that needed to be jumped through. They wore their cleanest clothes and their most respectful expressions, and they testified as character witnesses, one after another, telling judges and social workers that this child was safe with them. Protected, loved. And the landlord? One morning, he woke up to find 20 motorcycles parked on his lawn. Nobody said anything threatening. Nobody made any demands. 20 bikers just sat on their bikes, drinking coffee, watching his house for 6 straight hours. By noon, his lawyer had called Sandra Chen to discuss a settlement. By evening, Leo's grandmother's belongings had been found in a storage unit. The landlord had made a mistake in claiming legal eviction. Compensation was being arranged. Funny how that worked. During one meeting with Sandra, Leo noticed a photograph on her desk. An older black woman with gray hair and kind eyes, standing next to a much younger Sandra in a graduation gown. Who's that? Sandra looked at the photo. Her fierce expression softened into something tender. That's my grandmother. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident. I was 8 years old. Leo looked up at her. What happened? What happened was that I almost fell through the cracks. Foster system bounced me around for 2 years. Different homes, different schools, different caseworkers who didn't remember my name. I was angry. I was scared. I was convinced that nobody was ever going to want me. She touched the photo frame. And then my grandmother found out I existed. My father's mother, they'd lost touch years before I was born. She tracked me down. Hired a lawyer. Fought the system for 18 months. And when she finally got custody, she looked me in the eyes and said, "You're mine now. And I don't give up on what's mine." Leo felt something shift in his chest. His story wasn't unique. Wasn't special. Wasn't the only time a kid had been lost and then found. She sounds like my grandma. Sandra smiled. I think grandmothers are where they hide all the best people. And I think she would have wanted me to help kids like you. Kids who just need somebody to fight for them. She gathered her papers. So that's what I do. I fight. Sandra found them 3 weeks in. James and Marie Henderson. A black couple in their early 50s. Retired teachers he'd taught shop class for 30 years. She taught elementary school for 25. No biological children of their own. But they'd fostered 12 kids over the past decade. They've never adopted, Sandra told Bishop. Not because they didn't want to, because the timing was never right, or the kids had family to go back to, or it just didn't work out. But when I told them about Leo, Marie started crying before I finished the first sentence. And James asked if the dog needed any special food. The meeting was held at the clubhouse. Neutral territory. Somewhere Leo felt safe. He sat on the couch in the main room, Rusty pressed against his leg, and watched the door like it was about to deliver a verdict on his entire future. When the Hendersons walked in, Leo's first thought was that they looked normal. Not scary. Not fake. Just people. She was wearing a yellow sundress and he was wearing khakis and a button-down shirt, and they both looked nervous, which was weird. Grown-ups didn't usually look nervous around kids. Marie saw Leo and her face did something complicated. Joy and sadness and something fierce all mixed together. She walked over slowly. Carefully. Like she understood that sudden movements might spook him. And then she did something that cracked Leo's heart wide open. She crouched down. Just like Bishop had done. Just like Sandra did in her office. Getting on his level. Meeting him eye to eye. Hi, Leo. I'm Marie. Her voice was warm. Soft. Not the fake soft that adults used when they were about to lie to you. Real soft. I hear you've been taking care of yourself for a long time. Leo nodded. He didn't trust his voice. That must have been exhausting. It was such a simple thing to say. But nobody had said it before. Nobody had acknowledged how hard it had been. How tiring it was to be 9 years old and responsible for keeping yourself alive. Leo's eyes burned. He blinked rapidly. You don't have to do that anymore. Marie's eyes were wet too. And your dog is welcome. James already built him a bed. Didn't you? James? You. James had hung back, giving his wife space, but now he stepped forward. He was a big man, not biker big, but solid. Steady. He had sawdust on his shoes and calluses on his hands and a face that looked like it knew how to smile but also how to be serious when serious was needed. Built it myself, he said. Cedar frame. Memory foam cushion. That dog's gonna sleep better than I do. Leo looked at Rusty. Rusty's tail was wagging. Actually wagging. For the first time since Sterling Plaza. But Leo's voice came out cracked. What if you change your mind? Marie's face went soft. Not pitying. Understanding. Sweetheart. I know you can't believe me yet. I know you've been let down too many times to trust somebody's words. So I'm not going to ask you to trust me today. She reached out slowly, giving Leo time to pull away if he wanted to. He didn't. Her hand settled on his cheek. Warm. Steady. Real. I'm just going to show you. Every day. Every single day until you know it's true. However long that takes. I'm not going anywhere, Leo. Neither is James. We've been waiting for you for a long time. We just didn't know it until now. Meanwhile, Patricia Wellington's world collapsed. The video from Sterling Plaza went viral 3 days after the incident. Someone in the crowd had been recording. Someone always was. 11 million views in the first week. You belong with dogs. The words became a hashtag. A meme. A symbol of everything people hated about wealth and privilege and cruelty wrapped in designer clothes. Patricia's husband filed for divorce within the month. Gerald Wellington wasn't abandoning his wife out of moral outrage. He was abandoning a liability. The Wellington brand couldn't survive being associated with a woman who kicked homeless children. The math was simple. The marriage was collateral damage. The assault charges stuck. The animal cruelty charges stuck. Patricia's army of expensive lawyers managed to keep her out of jail, but they couldn't keep her out of consequences. The judge's sentence was poetic. 200 hours of community service. At the city's largest homeless shelter, the woman who told a child he belonged with garbage was now serving soup to people who slept on the streets. She was folding donated clothes and cleaning bathrooms and doing all the work she'd spent her whole life paying other people to do for her. According to sources who worked at the shelter, she spent most of her shifts crying in the bathroom. Nobody felt sorry for her. Leo didn't think about Patricia much. She was a footnote now. A before. Something that had happened to him on his way to something better. But sometimes, late at night, he'd remember her face. The contempt. The disgust. The absolute certainty that he was less than human. And he'd think about his grandmother's words. The Lord sees everything, baby. Everything comes back around. Everything had come back around. And Leo was still here. Still standing. Still loved. The room was too quiet. That was the first thing Leo noticed when Marie and James said goodnight and closed the door. The silence pressed against his ears like cotton. Thick and unfamiliar. For 3 months, he'd fallen asleep to the sounds of the city traffic, voices, sirens, the constant reminder that the world was still moving and he was still in it. Now there was nothing. Just the soft hum of the air conditioner and the distant tick of a clock somewhere in the house. The bed was too soft, too. Leo lay on top of the covers. Still wearing his new clothes. His body rigid with the inability to relax. The sheets were clean, so clean they smelled like flowers, and the pillow was thick and white and nothing like the wadded-up jacket he'd been using as a pillow for months. The room itself felt like a dream he might wake up from. There was a window with actual curtains. Blue ones. With little stars on them. There was a dresser with empty drawers waiting to be filled. There was a closet with hangers. There was a nightlight plugged into the wall near the door shaped like a motorcycle, chrome and black. Its tiny headlight glowing soft yellow in the darkness. James had found it online. Marie had mentioned it at dinner like it was nothing special. James spent 2 hours looking for just the right one. He wanted you to feel at home. 2 hours. Looking for a nightlight. For him. In the corner, Rusty was already asleep. The dog had circled his new cedar bed 3 times. James hadn't been exaggerating about the memory foam cushion and settled in with a contented sigh that Leo had never heard before. A sound of complete, unguarded peace. Rusty wasn't worried anymore. Leo wished he could stop worrying too. He stared at the ceiling. Counted the shapes in the textured plaster. Waited for something bad to happen, because something bad always happened. This was too good. Too safe. Too much like everything he'd been afraid to want. A soft knock on the door. Leo's whole body tensed. Leo? You still awake? Marie's voice. Gentle. Not demanding. Yes, ma'am. The door opened slowly. Marie was wearing a bathrobe now, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf. She looked softer in the dim light. Less like a teacher, more like a grandmother. More like his grandmother. Can't sleep? Leo shook his head. Marie crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't touch him. She'd learned already that Leo needed warning before contact, but her presence was warm. Solid. There. That makes sense. New place. New bed. New everything. She looked around the room like she was seeing it through his eyes. It's a lot. Leo nodded. He didn't trust his voice. When I was a little girl, Marie said, I had trouble sleeping sometimes too. Bad dreams, worries. All the things that feel bigger in the dark. She smiled softly. My mother used to sing to me. Said it was the only thing that helped. She paused. Would it be all right if I tried? You can tell me to stop any time. I won't be offended. Leo hadn't been sung to in 3 months. The last time was his grandmother. 3 days before she died. She'd been so weak, her voice barely a whisper, but she'd still hum the old hymns while Leo pretended to sleep. Like she knew, like she was giving him something to hold on to after she was gone. He nodded. Marie began to sing. It wasn't a song Leo knew. Something old. Something slow. Something that felt like it had been handed down through generations. Her voice was low and warm and imperfect. She wasn't a professional singer, wasn't trying to be, but that made it better. Made it real, made it sound like something meant just for him. The melody wrapped around Leo like a blanket. His eyes, which had been fighting to stay open, began to close. His body, which had been rigid with tension, began to soften. His breathing, which had been shallow and careful, began to deepen. Marie's song filled the quiet spaces in the room. Filled the quiet spaces in Leo's chest. Filled all the places where fear had been living with something gentler, something kinder, something that felt almost like peace. He was asleep before she finished the first verse. Marie kept singing anyway. Kept watch. Kept being there in the darkness, making sure this child knew even in his dreams that he wasn't alone anymore. In his dreams, Leo saw his grandmother. She was standing in her kitchen, the one from before, the one with the yellow curtains and the herb pots and the oven that clicked before it heated up. She wasn't sick anymore. Her face was full instead of thin. Her hands were steady instead of shaking. Her eyes were bright with all the life that had been draining out of her in those last months. She was smiling. There you are. Baby. I've been waiting. Leo tried to run to her, but dreams don't work that way. He was frozen in place, watching her from across the kitchen, aching to feel her arms around him. I told you, she said. I told you the good ones always find their way. Sometimes it just takes a little longer than we'd like. I miss you, Grandma. I know you do, baby. I miss you too. Every single day. She moved toward him now. The dream shifting, the distance collapsing. Her hand reached out and touched his cheek. Warm. Real. There. But you found them. Or they found you. Either way, you're not alone anymore. And that's all I ever wanted for you, Leo. That's all any of it was for. She kissed his forehead. You did good, baby. You did so good. Now rest. You've earned it. Leo woke up at dawn. The room was still quiet. Rusty was still asleep. The motorcycle nightlight was still glowing softly by the door. But something was different. Something inside Leo had shifted. Some weight had lifted. Some wound had started to close. He pulled the blanket up to his chin, and for the first time since his grandmother died, he let himself feel safe. Time does strange things when you're not fighting to survive. For 3 months on the street, every day had felt like a year. Every hour stretched thin with hunger and fear, every minute filled with the constant calculation of danger and safety and what came next. But now time moved differently. Days slipped into weeks. Weeks gathered into months. And somewhere in that gathering, Leo Henderson, because that was his name now, officially, legally, finally transformed from a boy who was surviving into a boy who was living. The first day of school was terrifying. Leo stood at the front gates of Washington Elementary. His new backpack heavy on his shoulders. His new clothes stiff with never having been worn. Kids streamed past him, laughing and shouting and reuniting with friends after summer break. None of them looked at him. None of them knew his story. None of them saw the homeless kid who'd been digging through trash cans 4 months ago. They just saw a kid. A normal kid. He could be anyone here. He could be no one. He could start over from nothing and become whatever he wanted to become. It was the most freeing and most frightening feeling of his life. Murray squeezed his hand. You ready? Leo wasn't ready. But he nodded anyway. And then the sound came. That rumble. That familiar, ground-shaking rumble that Leo had learned to associate with safety and protection and family showing up when you needed them. He turned. 20 motorcycles were pulling into the school parking lot. The principal came running out, her face a mixture of alarm and confusion. Parents were stopping on the sidewalk, pulling their children closer. Teachers were emerging from buildings with expressions that suggested they were reconsidering their career choices. Bishop climbed off his bike and removed his helmet. He walked over to Leo with a grin that made his weathered face look almost young. First day of school, he said. Couldn't miss it. Behind him, Tiny and Deacon and Hawk and all the others were dismounting, forming a loose honor guard around Leo and Marie and the principal, who looked like she might faint. Ah. The principal's voice was several octaves higher than normal. We don't usually have. Is there a problem? Should I call? No problem, Bishop said calmly. Just seeing our boy off for his first day. You'll take good care of him, right? The principal looked at Leo. Looked at the bikers. Looked back at Leo. Of course. Yes. Absolutely. Good. Bishop crouched down to Leo's level. You're gonna do great. Little man. And if anyone gives you trouble, I know. Tell you. Nah. Bishop grinned. Tell your teacher first. That's what they're for. We're the backup plan. He pulled Leo into a quick hug. Leather and road dust and that particular smell of engine oil that Leo had come to associate with safety. Now go learn something. We'll see you this weekend. The memories came at strange times. Leo would be sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, and suddenly he'd remember his grandmother walking him to kindergarten. How she'd held his hand so tight. How she'd kissed him at the door and said, "You're gonna shine. Baby. Shine so bright." He'd be in the backyard with James, learning to ride a bicycle, and suddenly he'd remember all the years of wishing he had a dad to teach him things like this. All the other kids talking about their fathers and Leo having nothing to say because his father was just a blank space, a question mark, a man who'd left before Leo was old enough to remember him leaving. But James was patient. James caught him when he wobbled. James cheered when he finally made it all the way down the driveway without falling. James didn't try to be Leo's father. But he was something. Something important. Something Leo hadn't known he needed until he had it. And then there was the birthday. Leo had forgotten it was coming. Had forgotten it was something that came, to be honest. On the streets, birthdays didn't matter. Days didn't even have names, really. Just today and tomorrow, and try to survive until the next one. But Marie remembered. She woke him up on a Saturday morning with a cake. A real cake. Chocolate with chocolate frosting. With 10 candles burning bright on top. James was there with a camera. Rusty was there with frosting somehow already on his nose. They sang, "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Leo." His grandmother used to make him a cake every year. Even when they couldn't afford presents. Even when the electricity was shut off and they had to light candles anyway because that was all they had for light. A birthday is sacred, baby. The day you came into this world. We celebrate that no matter what. Leo started crying halfway through the song. Marie stopped singing. James lowered the camera. For a moment, everyone was frozen, uncertain. Leo? Sweetheart, what's wrong? He couldn't explain it. Couldn't find words for the tangled mess of grief and joy and memory and hope that was flooding through him. Couldn't say that he was sad and happy and grateful and heartbroken all at the same time. So Marie just held him. Held him while he cried on his birthday, over a chocolate cake, in a house that was becoming home. And when the tears stopped, they ate cake together. And it was the best cake Leo had ever tasted. The courtroom was intimidating. All that wood. All those flags. All those serious faces and formal clothes, and the overwhelming sense that something important was happening here. Something permanent. Something that couldn't be undone. Leo sat between James and Marie at a long table. He was wearing a suit, his first suit, bought just for today, and the collar was itchy, but he didn't scratch. This was too important for scratching. Sandra Chen sat at the end of the table. Papers organized in neat stacks. Her face calm with the confidence of someone who'd won this battle before it started. And behind them, filling the gallery, spilling into the hallway, making the bailiff deeply concerned about fire codes, were the Steel Guardians. They'd cleaned up. Bishop was wearing an actual button-down shirt under his leather vest. Tiny had trimmed his beard. Deacon had removed most of his more questionable patches. They looked almost respectable, if you ignored the tattoos and the general air of barely contained physical power. The judge entered. Everyone stood. She was an older black woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a bun and glasses that she looked over rather than through. Her nameplate said Honorable Patricia Washington, no relation to the other Patricia, though Leo had checked and her expression said she'd seen 1,000 cases and wasn't easily impressed. She sat. Everyone else sat. She opened the file in front of her. Read silently for a long moment. Her eyes moved over the pages, taking in everything: Leo's history, his grandmother's death, his months on the street, his rescue, his placement, his progress. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes found Leo. Leo, I've read everything about your case. You've been through more in 9 years than many people face in a lifetime. Leo nodded. His throat was too tight for words. I see you've had quite a journey. From Sterling Plaza to this courtroom. Her eyes flicked to the gallery, to the wall of leather and barely contained emotion. And you've made some interesting friends along the way. A few chuckles from the bikers. The judge's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes might have softened. I have one question for you, Leo. And I want you to answer honestly. Not what you think I want to hear. Not what anyone else wants you to say. Just the truth. Leo sat up straighter. Do you want James and Marie Henderson to be your legal parents? The courtroom went silent. Leo looked at James, who was gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. He looked at Marie, who had tears already running down her cheeks. He looked at Bishop in the gallery, nodding slightly. Encouraging. He looked at the suspicious lump under James's coat that was definitely not a dog, definitely not Rusty, who had definitely not been smuggled into a courthouse because Leo had whispered that he needed him there. A year ago. Leo had been invisible. A year ago. A woman had told him he belonged with garbage. A year ago. He'd believed her. But here. Now. In this courtroom filled with people who loved him, blood family and chosen family and everything in between, Leo knew the truth. He belonged. Yes, ma'am. His voice was clear. Strong. Certain. I do. The judge smiled. Then, by the power vested in me by the state, I hereby grant this petition for adoption. Leo. You have a family. Congratulations. The courtroom exploded. The bikers were cheering, actually cheering, some of them standing up and shouting like they were at a rally instead of a legal proceeding. Marie was sobbing openly, reaching for Leo, pulling him into her arms. James was hugging them both. His big arms wrapping around his wife and his son, tears streaming down his face without shame. The suspicious lump under James's coat wriggled free and suddenly Rusty was there too, tail wagging, tongue lapping at Leo's tear-streaked face. The judge banged her gavel, trying to restore order. But she was smiling too. Even the bailiff was grinning. Leo closed his eyes. And in that moment, he saw his grandmother one more time. Standing in the back of the courtroom, visible only to him. Nodding, crying. Prouder than she'd ever been. You did good, baby. You did so good. The celebration at the clubhouse was everything Leo had come to expect from the Steel Guardians. Loud. Crowded. Full of food and laughter and people telling stories that got more outrageous with each retelling. Someone had put up a banner "Congrats Leo" and someone else had brought a cake even though they'd already had cake at the Hendersons' house. Bikers didn't do things small. Leo moved through the crowd, accepting hugs and handshakes and backpats that nearly knocked him over. Rusty trotted beside him, fat and happy, his tail, a constant metronome of contentment. Marie and James were somewhere in the chaos, probably being interrogated by Tiny about Leo's favorite foods and optimal snack schedules. Then Bishop appeared at Leo's elbow. "Hey, little man. Got something to show you." He led Leo away from the party, through the back hallways of the clubhouse, past the office and the bathroom and the room where Leo had cried in the shower all those months ago. They stopped at a door Leo had never been through. "Close your eyes." Leo closed them. He heard the door open. Felt Bishop's hand on his shoulder, guiding him forward. Smelled something familiar: motor oil and new paint and leather. "Okay. Open." Leo opened his eyes. For a moment, he couldn't process what he was seeing. It was a motorcycle. Small. Kid-sized. Built low to the ground with training wheels on the back and handlebars that actually fit Leo's hands. The frame was painted in Steel Guardian's colors, black and silver with red accents. The seat was real leather. Custom-sized. The chrome was polished until it gleamed. It was the most beautiful thing Leo had ever seen. "This is." His voice wouldn't work right. "This is. Yours." Bishop was grinning wider than Leo had ever seen him. "You can't ride it on the street yet. But in the back lot? With supervision?" He crouched down to Leo's level. Same as he'd done in Sterling Plaza. Same as he'd done a dozen times since. Getting on Leo's level. Meeting him eye to eye. "You're gonna learn to ride, little man. Every guardian learns to ride. And when you're old enough for the real thing, we'll be there for that too." Leo reached out and touched the handlebar. Cool metal. Real. Not a dream. "But this isn't just a bike, Leo." Bishop's voice had shifted. Gotten serious. Gotten heavy with meaning. "This is a promise. You're part of this family now. Not just the Hendersons, although they're your family too, the most important family. But us. All of us. For life." He put his hand on Leo's shoulder. "You'll always have people looking out for you. You'll always have somewhere to go. You'll always have brothers who'd ride through hell itself to get to you if you needed them. That's what this means. That's what being a guardian is." Leo remembered Sterling Plaza. Remembered the trash can. The sandwich. Patricia Wellington's face twisted with disgust. "You belong with dogs." He'd believed her, then. For just a moment. He'd believed that he was worthless. That he was garbage. That he deserved to be kicked and discarded and forgotten. But here he was. Claimed. Protected. Loved. Standing in a room full of chrome and leather. With a family waiting outside and a dog who'd never leave him and a future that stretched out bright and possible in every direction. He didn't have words. So he just hugged Bishop. And Bishop, this massive man who'd seen too much darkness. Who'd built a brotherhood out of broken people trying to be better, hugged him back. A year can change everything. Leo was 10 now. Taller by 3 inches. According to the marks on the kitchen doorframe where Marie measured him every month. Stronger, too, from weekend bike rides with James and training sessions at the clubhouse with Tiny. But the biggest changes were the ones you couldn't measure. He slept through the night now. Most nights. Anyway. The nightmares came less often. And when they did, Marie was there with her songs and James was there with his steady presence and Rusty was there with his warm weight against Leo's legs. He had friends at school. Real friends. Kids who invited him to birthday parties and sat with him at lunch and never asked about why he'd shown up in 4th grade instead of being there since kindergarten like everyone else. He had a room that was truly his. Posters on the walls, motorcycles mostly, but also some basketball players and a map of the world with pins in all the places he wanted to visit someday. Clothes in the closet that actually fit. Books on the shelf that he'd chosen himself. And on his dresser, in a silver frame Marie had picked out, a photograph of his grandmother. She was smiling in the picture. Younger than Leo had ever known her, standing in front of a house he didn't recognize with her arm around a man who might have been his grandfather. She looked happy. She looked like someone who didn't know yet how hard things would get, how short her time would be, how much she'd have to sacrifice. Every morning, Leo said good morning to that picture. Every night. He said good night. She was still with him. Always would be. Rusty was fat. There was no other word for it. The scrawny, trembling terrier who'd been kicked in Sterling Plaza was now the most spoiled dog in the neighborhood. He had 3 beds, one in Leo's room. One in the living room. One on the back porch for sunny days. He had treats that James baked himself from a recipe he'd found online. He had a wardrobe of tiny sweaters that Marie knitted during the winter months. He was ridiculous. Leo loved him more than ever. The Steel Guardians were still family. Every weekend, Leo visited the clubhouse. He was learning to maintain motorcycles under Tiny's patient supervision, how to check oil, How to change tires, how to listen to an engine and hear what it needed. He knew every biker's name now, their stories, their place in the brotherhood. He knew that Hawk had lost a son to gang violence 20 years ago, and that was why he never hesitated to help kids in trouble. He knew that Deacon had been homeless himself once, aged out of foster care with nothing but the clothes on his back. He knew that Bishop had founded the Steel Guardians after watching his sister die from abuse that nobody stopped, and had sworn that he'd spend the rest of his life stopping it for others. They all had stories. They all had reasons. They were all broken in some way, and they'd all chosen to use their broken pieces to build something that helped instead of hurt. Leo was learning that's what family really meant. The anniversary arrived on a Tuesday. 1 year since Sterling Plaza. 1 year since a woman in designer heels had kicked a homeless boy and called him garbage. 1 year since 20 motorcycles had rolled into a parking lot and changed everything. The Steel Guardians marked it with a ride. But not a ride for Leo. A ride for all the kids like Leo. The ones still invisible. The ones still scavenging. The ones still waiting on sidewalks and sleeping in doorways. Hoping someone would see them. Praying someone would stop. They called it the Guardian Ride. 20 motorcycles loaded with supplies, food, clothes, blankets, toiletries, everything a kid on the streets might need. They rode through the city, stopping wherever they found homeless youth, passing out supplies and business cards with phone numbers and the simple message: "You're not alone. Call if you need help." Leo rode with them now. On the back of Bishop's bike, watching the city stream past, he saw faces that reminded him of himself. Scared faces. Hungry faces. Faces that had forgotten what hope felt like. He waved at every one of them. Some waved back, and in their eyes, Leo saw the same spark he'd felt that day in Sterling Plaza. The same fragile, desperate question: could this be real? Could someone actually care? He hoped they could see the answer in his face. Yes. Someone cares. Help is coming. Just hold on. The ride ended in a park. A gathering had formed: bikers and families and city officials and news cameras that Bishop tolerated but didn't acknowledge. Someone had set up a small stage with a microphone. Someone else had arranged chairs for the guests. Bishop approached Leo. "We'd like you to say something." Leo's stomach dropped. "Me? Say what?" "Whatever you want. Tell them your story. Tell them what this means. Or don't say anything at all, nobody's forcing you. But I think people might need to hear what you have to say." Leo looked at the crowd. At the cameras. At all those faces waiting for something. He thought about his grandmother. "Hold your head up, Leo. You're just as good as anybody." He thought about Marie and James, sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. He thought about Sterling Plaza. About the trash can. About the woman who'd kicked him and the men who'd saved him and everything that had happened since. "Okay," he said. "I'll try." He walked to the stage. Climbed the steps. Stood behind the microphone, which someone had to lower because he was still just a kid, even if he didn't feel like one anymore. The crowd went quiet. Leo took a breath. "A year ago," he said, and his voice only shook a little, "a lady told me I belonged with dogs." Murmurs from the crowd. Camera flashes. She meant it as the worst thing she could say. Like I was worthless. Like I was garbage. Like I didn't deserve to be in the same space as people like her. He paused. Looked at Bishop, standing off to the side. Looked at the Hendersons. Looked at Rusty, sitting at James's feet, tail wagging slowly. "But here's what I figured out. She was wrong, but not the way you might think." He stepped closer to the microphone. "Dogs are loyal. Dogs protect their own. Dogs don't care what you look like or what's in your pocket or whether your shoes have holes in them. Dogs just love you. They show up. They don't leave. They stay with you through the worst of it." He looked at the bikers gathered behind the crowd. At their leather and their tattoos and their faces that looked scary until you knew what was behind them. "So yeah. I belong with dogs. I belong with people who act like dogs, people who show up when it matters. Who protect the ones who can't protect themselves. Who don't care about money or status or any of that stuff." His voice was stronger now. Steady. "I belong with family. And family isn't about blood. It's not about whose name you share or what you look like. Family is about who claims you. Who stays. Who shows up when you need them most." He stepped back from the microphone. "The Steel Guardians showed up for me. The Hendersons showed up for me. And now we show up for other kids. Because everybody deserves what I got. Everybody deserves a chance." He looked directly into one of the cameras. "If you're out there right now, and you think nobody cares, and you're hungry or scared or alone, hold on. Help is coming. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But it's coming. And when you hear that rumble, when you feel that thunder in your chest, don't run away." He smiled. That might be your family coming to find you. The sun was setting. Golden light spilled across the park, catching chrome, turning the motorcycles into a line of gleaming flames. The crowd had dispersed. The cameras had gone. What remained were the people who mattered: bikers and family, and Leo, standing beside his kid-sized motorcycle, ready to ride. Bishop walked over. He looked older in this light. Tired. Maybe. But also proud. Satisfied. Like a man who'd found what he was supposed to be doing and had done it well. Ready to ride? Little man? Leo grinned. It was a real grin. The kind that only comes from someone who's been through darkness and found their way to light. Always. He swung onto his motorcycle. He was getting good now, didn't need the training wheels anymore, and settled into the seat. The engine hummed beneath him, small but real, a heartbeat he could feel in his bones. Around him, 20 Harleys rumbled to life. 21 bikes, now. A convoy of chrome and leather and love made loud. James and Marie waved from the edge of the park, Rusty bouncing between them. The Steel Guardians formed up around Leo. Bishop at the front. Leo right behind him. Protected on all sides by the family he'd found when his blood family was gone. They began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. The wind hit Leo's face, warm and free. The setting sun painted everything gold. The road stretched out ahead of them, full of possibility, full of distance, full of everything Leo had never dared to hope for. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't garbage. He was Leo Henderson, son of James and Marie. Brother to 20 bikers who'd die for him. Survivor of something terrible. An inheritor of something beautiful. He was loved. He was home. Sometimes the people who look the scariest have the biggest hearts. Sometimes the kids who look invisible have the most to give. And sometimes, when a little boy stands over a trash can with nothing but a hungry dog and a desperate hope, the thunder he hears isn't trouble coming. It's help on the way. If you believe that family is about who shows up, not who shares your blood. Subscribe to Bikers Bite. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what you would have done if you'd been there that day. Share this with someone who needs to believe that good people still exist. That help still comes, that the world isn't as cold as it sometimes seems. And remember, the rumble you hear might not be danger. It might be your family coming to find you.